All right, welcome back. This is presentation 3 of Chapter 12, Bureaucracy. We've been talking a little bit about what bureaucratic agencies do, the role they play within the government. We've talked a little bit about the different kinds of bureaucratic agencies there are in the federal bureaucracy. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the people within the bureaucracy. So who are bureaucrats? Federal hiring in the 18th and 19th centuries was dominated by what was known as the spoils system, which basically meant that people who got jobs within the bureaucracy were effectively partisans, and they got their jobs based on party connections. Most members of the federal bureaucracy work today under what is known as the merit system, which was created by the Pendleton Act, which was actually passed as a result of the assassination of James Garfield in a couple of years prior to that. The guy that killed him was a frustrated job seeker, and so the sense was, and presidents going all the way back to Lincoln were complaining about just how onerous the job was of just finding people to fill the bureaucratic positions. So the idea was, again, to create a sense in which rank and file bureaucrats, civil servants, were neutral, that their only job is simply to implement policy and not to, they don't have to support it or oppose it. In fact, they're not supposed to care one way or the other. The result of that, too, is that civil servants under a merit system can't be fired except for cause. There has to be some demonstration of corruption or manifest incompetence in order to justify terminating somebody within a merit system. In 1978, the Civil Service Reform Act created the Merit Systems Protection Board, again, to specifically protect against the politicization of hiring, firing, and promotion within the civil service. That's one thing that many people are concerned about with this 2024 election, that Donald Trump is actually making moves and advocating getting rid of many civil service protections in order to promote loyalty to his person, among the rank and file members of the federal bureaucracy, which would be, again, going against 150 years of precedent. There are political appointees, about 4,000 political appointees, so that's a big job that presidents have to make. That's one of the reasons why you have to go through a transition period, so that presidents have sufficient time to identify people who can be appointed to executive branch positions. Just over 1,000 of those 4,000 require Senate confirmation. Again, that's a time-consuming process. But again, the cabinet secretaries, the assistant secretaries, there's a lot of people that the Senate actually have to sign off on. Many political appointees have ties to the president or the president's party. Presidents' appointment patterns often reflect their backgrounds. Democratic presidents have tended to emphasize diversity in their cabinet hires. Obama nominated 7 women and 10 people of color to his first cabinet. Republican presidents have tended to emphasize business backgrounds in nominating cabinet members, and they may only have 1 or 2 token women or minorities in their cabinets. There is something called the SES, the Senior Executive Service. It was created by the Civil Service Reform Act of 1978. That's designed to promote what is known as public management, and that is the idea of allowing career civil servants moving into this SES, which means you lose merit protections, but it provides them with opportunities to pursue upper appointed positions within the federal bureaucracy. As president, again, Donald Trump exploited what is known as the Federal Vacancies Reform Act of 1998 in several notable ways. One, he neglected to appoint many top positions well into his term of office. Second, over time, he went with an abnormally large number of acting secretaries, creating an environment where cabinet positions were occupied by individuals who could be fired, at a whim by Donald Trump. And so people who are Senate appointed, oftentimes it's harder to get rid of them. knowing that you have to go through a Senate confirmation process. So a lot of people felt like he was abusing that process. Bureaucratic bloat, this is something that is, again, a perennial issue in American government. The size of the federal bureaucracy has been at the center of contentious debate for decades. During the Clinton administration, Vice President Al Gore Jr. led a national performance review designed to reduce the paperwork, improve communications across agencies, streamline government purchasing procedures, and reduce the overall size of the federal workforce. And the result of that, in 1968, the size of the federal workforce, excluding uniformed military, was around 3 million. By 2019, the federal workforce had been reduced by, to 2.8 million. Likewise, the size of the uniformed military has declined from 3.6 million to 1.29 million. And so again, with a country as large as ours, with a population as large as ours, we're the third or fourth largest country in the world, third or fourth largest population in the world. The question is, do bureaucratic agencies have sufficient personnel? Rather, they're not bloated. In many instances, they may be starved for resources. So again, the complaints that continue to this day of rampant, unaccountable bureaucrats. Nevertheless, the size of the federal bureaucracy has consistently declined since 1968. Privatization is a process where formerly public service, services are transferred to private companies with the government paying the cost. Has at various times appealed to both Democrats and Republicans. Advocates of contracting public services claim greater efficiency and cost savings. Critics argue that both claims of efficiency and costs are oftentimes overblown, and that privatization oftentimes creates serious accountability issues, because a lot of times, again, these folks will, they'll bid out to a contract, and then they'll say, well, we underbid, and now we need to raise our estimates. And that creates an environment, again, where, when you look at after Hurricane Hugo, much of the levee system was rebuilt with private contracting, and in many instances, there was an enormous amount of cost overruns that really wasn't adequately covered. So again, bureaucracy and bureaucrats. This slide, again, self-explanatory. It shows you consistently over time the size of the federal bureaucracy has declined over the years. Bureaucracy needs to be managed. They pose a tremendous challenge to democratic governance. While bureaucratic agencies provide the needed expertise, they can also become entrenched, serving agencies' interests rather than the general welfare. The constitutional status of the bureaucracy can be found in Article 2, Section 2. The Constitution's language authorizes presidents to nominate officers of the United States and instructs the president to require the opinion in writing of the principal officer in each executive department upon any subject relating to the duties of their respective office. Likewise, Article 2, Section 3 includes an admonition that the president take care that the laws be faithfully executed. The federal bureaucracy exists to that end. Two important questions. Does the president and Congress have sufficient control over unelected bureaucratic agencies? Question number two, can the president and Congress manage their respective controls over the bureaucracy to avoid conflict, gridlock, and other forms of mismanagement? And again, key to this, and it may seem sort of counterintuitive in our increasingly adversarial system of government, there's a great need for trust in order for both Congress and the president to control the bureaucracy. Otherwise, the bureaucracy can either be allowed to run amok, or it can be so over-controlled by both president and Congress that it's incapable of doing its job. So there has to be this sweet spot where there's a certain amount of trust extended to bureaucratic agencies, but where they are also made aware that there is someone looking over their shoulders, so that they can, so that they are aware that they can be held accountable. The president is the chief executive. The president's appointment power is a major tool of bureaucratic control, but the Senate's confirmation power can erode or certainly check that power. The executive office of the president is a key component of the federal bureaucracy and is most directly responsive to the president. Again, within the EOP, the Office of Management and Budget is a powerful tool for presidents to emphasize their own priorities and policy goals. Presidents, and this is something that Obama did quite frequently, presidents can often appoint policy czars to address specific policies. Again, that signals responsiveness to particular issues, such as an illicit drug czar, an Ebola czar, an Asian carp czar, a cybersecurity czar, etc. Again, over the course of his administration, Donald Trump basically avoided using policy czars. He actually kind of, I think, wanted to be perceived as being the guy. Despite these tools, presidents confront several challenges in managing the federal bureaucracy. Presidents struggle to appoint secretaries who will faithfully execute their vision. And sometimes cabinet secretaries go native. This is the claim that they're more responsive to the needs of their departments rather than to the president above them. They'll resist a president whose policy goals run contrary to the culture of a bureaucratic agency. Sometimes appointed secretaries turn out to be incompetent managers of the agencies they lead. Interest groups engage with bureaucratic agencies and will often seek to shape policy in ways that may or may not support the president's agenda. So these are all things that can kind of throw a monkey wrench into the president's vision of how he should be governing. Congressional control. Congress controls the purse strings, especially the House of Representatives, and that is the most important tool for controlling bureaucratic agencies. Congress can pass legislation changing the location or structure of bureaucratic agencies, and Congress can limit president's ability to remove agency heads. Congress can make political or policy statements with their organizational choices. To illustrate, in 1953, Congress created the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. And then in 1978, Congress separated education away from that department, creating a separate Department of Education to emphasize the federal government's increasing role in education policy. Congress has three large agencies, the Congressional Research Service, the GAO, and the CBO, to conduct additional oversight. The Congressional Accountability Office is considered the supreme audit institution, providing Congress with information on how tax dollars are spent and how government agencies could be made more efficient. You also, again, have this idea of oversight. Members of the committees can call members of the executive bureaucracy in. There are two different kinds of oversight. Police patrol involves regular or even preemptive congressional hearings on agencies' operations. In contrast, fire alarm oversight is episodic and usually is prompted by media attention or some disaster. An example of fire alarm oversight is the 2016 inquiry by the House Oversight and Reform Committee into a 500% price hike on EpiPens, which are used to treat allergic reactions. Inspectors General, the Inspectors General Act in 1978 created nonpartisan independent offices in most executive branch agencies with the authority to audit agency operations and to uncover instances of waste, fraud, and abuse. Cabinet-level Inspector Generals are nominated by the President and confirmed by the Senate. In other instances, agency heads appoint the IG. Agency heads cannot interfere with Inspector General audits or investigations. As president, Donald Trump interfered with the operations of inspector generals of several high-profile departments, actions that were considered at the time legal, but were considered political intrusions into legitimate inquiries. Over a span of 6 weeks in 2020, following his acquittal in his first impeachment, Trump removed 5 inspector generals for the intelligence community, the transportation department, the Defense Department, Health and Human Services, and the State Department. Several Democratic members of Congress accused Trump of engaging in unlawful retaliation against inspector generals who were conducting investigations into actions of Trump allies. And even some Republicans were concerned about the vague rationales offered for the firings. Presidential and congressional struggles for bureaucratic control, a case study. In 2007, 2008, you had a major financial crisis that led to calls for greater levels of consumer protections. A key causal factor in the financial crisis were the number of mortgage originators who were flooding the market with fraudulent loan packages, including liar loans, exploding ARMs, etc. They were aggressively pushed onto borrowers who in many instances may not have understood what they were agreeing to. At the urging of then Harvard Law professor and future Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren, Congress included in the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act of 2010 the creation of the Consumer Financial Protection Board. Disagreements soon emerged between the Obama administration and the congressional Republicans over the structure, funding, and location of the CFPB. While the legislation made the CFPB an independent agency located inside the Federal Reserve System with funding automatically provided by a fixed percentage of the Fed's operating expenses with a single director appointed by the president, Republicans wanted the CFPB's funding to be annually appropriated by Congress, which would have given Congress tremendous influence over the agency. And they also wanted the CFPB to be led by a multi-member board rather than a single person. Advocates for the CFPB contended that the arrangement set up by the congressional Democrats was necessary to preserve its independence, and the Senate confirmation was a sufficient check on the president's influence. Republicans first filibustered Elizabeth Warren, who was Obama's first choice to head the CFPB, and she withdrew her nomination and ran for Massachusetts Senate, which was a seat held by a Republican named Scott Brown, who she defeated in 2012. Obama's subsequent selection, Ohio former State Treasurer Richard Cordray, was also filibustered, leading Obama to use a recess appointment. When Donald Trump won the presidency in 2016, he nominated former South Carolina Congressperson Mick Mulvaney, who had proposed legislation eliminating the CFPB. Some members of the CFPB's Consumer Advisory Board criticized him in 2018, and Mulvaney subsequently had the entire 25-member board removed. These are examples of, again, Republicans wanted effectively to capture the CFPB, to render it ineffective as a consumer protection board. I'm sorry to put it any other way, but that's simply what it was. So that's it for this presentation. When we get back, we will run one more presentation on bureaucracy. I'll see you next time.